Hey there, Dorian. Thanks for submitting a video coaching review, and also thanks for letting me use it on my channel for content. For those of you that don't know what a video coaching review is, I sit down like this in front of my computer and review people's form and questions that they may have. Specifically, I check out videos that they usually send me in regards to them shooting, along with some questions. If you're interested in submitting your own video coaching review, I will have links down in the description below to my website, jkaminski.com, where you can grab one yourself. And thanks again to Dorian for letting me use this as content on my channel. So we'll go into your actual email first, Dorian, and then we'll check the actual shot process and see how that's going. Excuse me. So let's see, you've shot about 120 arrows in the film session, and you notice that since you introduced a new hook and anchor, you can shoot 2 to 3 dozen more arrows before being out of juice. That's awesome. Definitely in the small victories, celebrating those is very, very important. They all add up, you know, grains of sand add up to a giant heap eventually one day. And you've shot about 650 arrows in the last 10 days since you've changed your tabs leathers. And even though you didn't score anything seriously, you've seen the number of X's and 10s increase. And you think you shot your first 110 out of 120 at 30. That's awesome. And you've reduced the tiller a bit, and you've not felt your index finger slipping again. That's good. Good. Excuse me. Feel free to quickly check the previous videos. They have a point of comparison. You're eager to think if you've properly implemented those. Yep. And 1 was raising the bow without loading too much. 2, anchoring point was less on the side and increasing the anchor pressure yet. And then also lowering the grip pressure. Yep. Don't open the hand when you let go, and turning the wrist on release. And remember all those things. If you have any more specific questions, I'll check. And okay. So if I have any tips on how to reduce wincing, you're all ears. All right, we'll find out. Let's get these opened up and resized so you can see it properly. Okay. Too bad. All right, so there's a little inconsistency in the way you generate the power. Couple of things. One really quick thing. It looks like your finger sling's too long for me, for my preference. The bow's just kind of out of control after the bow is jumping out of your hand, and you're really having to move your bow arm what appears to be towards the camera to the right to prevent the limb from hitting you. And part of that is going to be because of the actual excessive length of the string, the finger sling itself. So generally speaking, if you're touching your thumb and index finger together like this, where the loops are touching, you should just barely be able to do so. I made a video on how to make a finger sling and make sure it's the correct length. I'll make sure I include it in the reply to your video coaching review here, and I'll include it in links in the description too. But it just appears that it's too long, and because of that, the bow is going to be pretty unwieldy as it is rotating and following through, and that's why you're going to have to kind of turn the wrist and also move the bow arm to the right, so then the limb clears you instead of staying still and then the limb hitting you, right? Been there, done that. A sling being too long can cause all sorts of different problems. What I was going to say earlier is, this is your first shot. If you look at the position you're in here in set position, this is very appropriate and proper, but before you lift the bow, you really start to increase tension here against the string. Let me move this a little bit, framed backwards there. So as you are in this position, it looks great. It just, to me, before you lift, you're increasing pressure here before you lift the bow here, and you'll see that sequence of movements right here. So you're increasing your tension back a little bit more than you're lifting, in my opinion, and then you kind of get into the shot. But if you watch, this one was a little bit quicker, and then the bow arm is kind of a little sloppy, I guess, for lack of better terms. If you watch the way the bow jumps, it kind of is like throwing out of your arm here. Compared to your second shot, it's much more stable, stays a little bit more put, in my opinion. And I'm not necessarily looking at just the arm. If you watch the body reaction, it kind of shifts forward through follow through here. just that little bit. I can see it coming from the shoulder area. This section kind of moves out a little bit more compared to this one. It's a little bit more stable as far as the body. It's just a little bit off. And I think the second one, if you watch, you'll preload much more here before you lift the bow in your set position. You're much further back this way with a little bit more preload on the actual brace height. So try to be a little bit more consistent here in that pre-shot routine. You know, I can see that as you're getting into the shot, after you load the arrow, when you set your hook and your grip, you know, your shoulder's elevated, you breathe, drop it down and relax and kind of stand tall before you lift the bow, which is really good. Just try to make sure that your tension here is also equalized for each shot as best as you can. That'll really help kind of control the body a little bit better if you can do so. Let me see, I'm gonna have to check the other views to see what's going on. The overall body position once you get to full draw is great, but you do have a little bit of shifting of the hips as you're lifting the bow. As you're going from this position here and set through setup, there's a little bit of hip movement, and as you draw, it continues to move where this hip is turning this way and this hip is turning that way. So you're actually rotating the hips, it looks like, as you're setting your alignment through the rotation of the torso. So I would try to look at stabilizing with the hips a little bit more to lock them in place. Let's get a different view here. And just pay attention to your hips. So you've got them set here, and you can use your arrows as a reference. So you're probably going to see these arrows move this direction. Probably going to see these arrows move this direction off to the right, showing that your hips are rotating the same way that the shoulders are going to be rotating. Yeah, see how they rotate and rotate and rotate. So that's telling me that your hips are probably pointing in line to the target as opposed to being pointed or staying over your feet. So if we look at the view here that you've got, so you'll see that now that you're in setup position, you have an open stance, because it looks like you're shooting at this target here. You have an open stance and your hips are over your feet, exactly how it should be. Let me shrink that up a little there. And what's going to happen is these hips are probably going to be pointed towards the target once you get to full draw. Yeah, you can see how your hips are now pointed more this way instead of pointed that way. And that is just probably because of, let's look a little bit longer. I'm not sure if your legs are completely straight when you're at full draw. You may have soft knees, because now it looks like this leg is straight, and then see how it's bent? It seems like you're bending your knees when at full draw. So what you want to do is, and I'll make sure I have a link for you for this one too, it's a stability video on how to set your hips. There's two different ways to do it and to lock the legs in place. You've really got to shoot from a really solid platform, and you have to shoot from a base that is solid. You have to start from a good solid place, otherwise everything else doesn't make sense, right? So what you got to do is, first step is to straighten your legs all the way. And you actually want to lock your knees, where you're actually lifting the kneecap up, flexing the quadriceps muscles to actually lock the knees, like you shouldn't be doing when you're standing around all day, every day, because if you do it for too long, you can pass out. But this is only from set to the arrow hitting the target. So it in total should be about maybe 12 to 15 seconds total. And then after you shoot the arrow, you're supposed to relax this leg lock so you're not going to pass out because of lack of blood flow to the brain. So you're going to lock your knees, then you're going to tuck your hips under, like you're going to go do a small sit. It's as if you're holding a coin between your butt cheeks. And then what you want to do is imagine your feet being on paper towels, your feet on each square with the perforated line in the middle that you would rip the paper towels on. And with that hip tuck being in place, knees locked, you will then move your feet out gently as if you were trying to tear the paper towels apart. And you will keep that movement, that tension, until you hear the arrow hit the target, and that will make things far more stable. And then there's another alternative way that as you have the knees locked, hips tucked, you are trying to externally rotate the legs but you're keeping your feet straight on the ground. You're not going to actually move, and same thing when you're going out. You're not going to actually move your feet or bend them this way or inside or with the toes going out. It's flat, going straight apart in that kind of motion. You can do the external rotation of the legs instead of the tear. It's, you know, kind of really just up to individual preference. For me, I like the external rotation. Personally, I find that to be far more stable for myself, because what you want to do is have from the sternum down, from here down, is supposed to be locked all in one piece and not move at all through lifting and pulling the bow back. And here you can see as I go forward and back in time, look how much the hips and that quiver are changing and turning as you're pulling the bow back like this. So that's showing me that you have no stability going on really from here down. Everything's just kind of relaxed and you're not shooting from a stable platform. So in the wind, it's going to be quite punishing and very difficult to be consistent. Another thing is that as you're in this position here, as you slouch, you're kind of, because of the position that your legs are in, you're going to have a natural little sway in the back. You're not going to flatten out that back without that hip tuck, without the locking of the legs into place. And once that happens, as you lift the bow, you're going to be very likely to have this kind of shape here, this arch of the back, which again is going to be a fairly weak position compared to having the hips tucked in a good solid position and locked in place. And because of that arching of the back, the string is going to be fairly close to this chest, and I'm surprised that the string's not touching your chest. I'm glad that it's not, but you'll get far more clearance of the string on the chest with having those hips tucked, because of it will help prevent that arching of the back, which brings the string very close, to the chest when at full draw. Good news is your elbow does move in a very good motion back and around and follows the exact tension line that it should, because as you follow through, the tip of this elbow should follow the line of the humerus, the upper bone in your arm, in the direction towards the shoulder. And you'll see that it moves pretty much straight along this line. Really, really nice. And there is a little bit of excessive external rotation of the hand to get it back here behind your head. It's not a bad thing. It's just a position change, or a position that you like to go to when you're actually followed through. It's not that bad. It's totally fine. You can see how far back and around the hand comes, despite the elbow really only coming to in line with the other arm. If you were to be looking from overhead, say if my target was, you know, that direction back there, when I follow through, you're only going to about this position. You can continue to go, seeing how the tip of the elbow follows this. You can continue to go until you cannot move anymore, which would move the hand around here like so. You can do that if you'd prefer. It really doesn't matter. Chances are, because of the bow hand movement to the right to prevent the bow from hitting you due to the excessively long sling, and as you can see, it's moving to the right, so that limb clears your body and clears your face. Chances are, because you're having to move this way, you're ending that tension here, coming around and stopping in just that straight position instead of all the way around. You're ending it because of that bow swinging. The reason I would really try to fix this bow sling issue being too long is because of the movement of the bow arm that you're having to do. Because when the shot breaks, and I'm going to zoom this in a little bit because we're not interested in the lower half. I just want to show you the bow itself. See how the bow hand stays nice and still, which is good. The bow jumps out to the target, and you'll see that the bow itself, therefore the bow hand, is moving to the left. After that first initial jump out, now the bow is moving to the left, which is exactly how it should. And then either because of the way the bow is going to swing, or because you're even ending the tension here, but most likely it's the bow. Yeah, the bow. Because you're moving the bow arm to the right to prevent the bow from hitting you, you've stopped this retraction. And if you shoot with a correct tension and direction, which you are, and you keep this position right here, after the bow is jumped out of your hand and continued to move to the left, if you keep this position, and instead of trying to move the bow away from you, if you just move this index finger down, like this motion, through follow through, and you keep this open without squeezing it, because you're squeezing it here. I can clearly see you're squeezing your thumb and index finger together like this. If you keep it open like that, the bow is going to turn. Instead of swinging straight and hitting you, it's going to turn and it's going to clear you and not even come close to you, with this hand staying nice and still and not needing to swing to the right towards the camera as it does in this shot. So every shot it's doing this kind of motion, because as you can see, just watch the angle of the bow and how it's like all over the place as it's rotating. So your angle's straight, the bow jumps, and then it's just flopping all over the place because the sling's just far too long. Overall, not too bad. One thing I would encourage you to do is really make sure once you get to full draw, transfer, meaning really take your time to make sure that you're engaged in your back, you're locked into position, your alignment's set in place. Give yourself a moment to actually still and calm the brain. Give yourself an actual time to calm down. And then start to build tension by expanding, expand, and follow through. Don't just jump immediately in from loading to get to your anchor and then expansion. Don't jump right into it. You'll see it's very quick and there's not a whole lot of stillness going on, for lack of better terms. Really try to, and let's try it, check a different shot. Try to just take a moment once you get to full draw, even if it's just a half a second, to give yourself the opportunity to still the brain, settle in, and then go for it. So it's a little rushed. It appears to be a little rushed. So if you were to come to full draw, take time and then go for it, you'll be far more consistent, especially under pressure. That's what Coach Lee would refer to as holding, taking the hold, or achieving back tension, or calming down. So you really have to build tension up and then calm down and then expand to finish. Okay, it's something that seems a little funny, but it really just gives you an opportunity to excuse me, make sure everything is correct. So it gives you an opportunity to make sure, is my head position correct? Is my anchor correct? Am I in my back tension? Do I have my brain on the right thought process on how to pull through the clicker? Do I have all of the lights green, all of the things with a thumbs up that I'm needing to do in order to shoot a good shot? Like, for example, if you rush into the shot too quickly, your string alignment, your anchor, the tension of the push-pull, the balance of your feet, all sorts of different things. You may not recognize that some of those, one or all of those, may not be correct. And then by then you've already got into expansion, pulling through the clicker. And so if you rush into it too quickly, you can actually miss pieces. So if you come to full draw and just give yourself a half of a second to just settle and then go, you could recognize your head position's off, your anchor's off, your feet balance is off, or something. And it gives you an opportunity to either fix it or let down and start over completely. I think that would be quite helpful for you. And there's maybe a little rushing to actually pull the bow back too, because if I look from this angle, you should lift, set the barrel of the gun or the alignment, which also is kind of just the pressure of the bow. So lift, computer's slowing down, lift, set the bow, then pull. For me, it's like you're kind of lifting and pulling a little bit out of sequence. You're lifting, pulling, setting the bow arm, and then anchoring, as opposed to lift, set the bow arm, and then pull. So try to lift, set the bow arm, pull, anchor, and then settle, shoot. So this one was a little bit better, so it wasn't as quick and as rushed either. I think that would really help. But it just seems like you're out of sequence and that you're pulling a little bit before you're actually setting that bow arm or setting the barrel of the gun, as Coach Lee would say. Now, let's see, from this angle. Yeah, and you can see from this angle, if you're watching your bow hand, again, I think it's mostly related to the actual sling length being a little bit excessive. You can see the back of your hand is turning in relation to the bow a fair amount. So here it's pretty flat. Try your best to try to push that thumb forward and pull this pinky back so the back of your hand is kind of flat to you as much as possible. Right now it's at this kind of angle like that, so I can see a little bit more of the pinky side, and you have a little bit of excessive tension there with the pinky kind of flared out, so just relax that down and pull and turn the wrist with the back of the hand being flat instead. And then when the bow is jumping, keep this thumb forward, pinky back as you're doing this motion here. You'll see it goes from nice and flat here to then it's, as you go down in this downward motion, you're going to see your hand do this. So as you're doing this, you're also doing this, like this motion. So see how the hand is now rotated like this, and then you're going to go back again to this motion now being more flat. So this angle here, as you go to shoot, you want it to just go down and stay straight and rotate on one axis, not do this. You've kind of got this going on. So if you watch it in real time, it's okay here, but then so it's this rotation that I'm talking about. Again, probably related to that sling being a little bit too long. So I would really work on those things and go from there. I think the hip stability will help fix a whole lot of the inconsistency in the actual setup of the balance and all of those things and the process of lifting the bow. Excuse me. It might even naturally neutralize or kind of balance that over preload sometimes, and may even stabilize the sequence of when you're setting the bow versus pulling the bow back. So definitely start first with the hip stability and then go from there. And let me know if you have any questions. Don't hesitate to ask. Just reply to this email. And thanks again for submitting a video coaching review.